This is the first in my series, Counseling Tips for Adults. And today I'm responding to somebody who sent me a private message asking how to handle grief over the holidays. So I'm going to talk about this in three ways. First, I'll talk about just the loss of connection you experience when you lose someone, the kind of wisdom that you can find through grief, and then some tools or skills to help you get through the holidays. So first, when talking about loss is a loss of a connection. And it's sharing personally, when I was young, way too young, I got married, and the man I got married to died. And I just remember how devastated I was by his loss. And not only was I devastated by his loss, I felt trapped in this sort of weird place where I couldn't connect to the other people in my life. Like, they were moving on with things like holidays and parties or get-togethers and acting like we always used to act, but I wasn't able to do that anymore, and I couldn't relate, and so I felt totally alienated and disconnected from them as well. Anyway, something to do with loss is to try to find some ways to connect. And connect from the place that you're at now in an honest way. Not trying to make yourself be happy to fit in with people who are happy, but to perhaps look for other kinds of people to connect to, people who have suffered in similar ways or are suffering now. If you don't know anyone like that in your personal life, you could look like online and type in something like how to deal with grief or loss over the holidays or loss of a loved one, and you'll find a whole bunch of sites, and a lot of them have chats on them and stories that you can hear from other people and how they got through it. That can be super helpful. In your community too, if you wanted to, you might be able to establish a group, if there isn't one, for loss and those dealing with, maybe it's loss in the same kind as yours or loss in general, and which you could even take some leadership and use your suffering in a way to help others to get through theirs. And doing that helps you as well. I know for me, I've had my own suffering, and for me as a therapist, it feels very healing to be able to reach out and connect with others who are or have gone through similar kinds of pains, or just any kind of pain, actually. So that brings me to the next thing is you can feel a loss of connection with yourself when you're going through a major loss. I mean major meaning one of the most important people in your life, somebody that you felt really intimate with. So if it's a child, for example, you can have this idea of identity of being their mom, and that's gone too. So you lost them, but you also lost this you that was their mom. And if you can find a way then to go inside and just be like, okay, so ask that question to yourself, not as just a painful, agonizing way, who am I if I'm not their mom, but meaning, who am I if I'm not their mom? What else is there? What little lights are there in the inside that want to live and want to embrace life anyway and want to shine? And how could I find those and honor those in my own life? That's really important, I think. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the wisdom of grief. So our bodies know what to do, basically. And if you fall down and you get a cut in your leg, it bleeds for a bit and then it scabs over and it heals. You can think about your feelings in the same kind of way. You had this devastating thing happen, and it's hugely painful loss, and so your heart is breaking. Or it feels just totally broken, shattered, and there can be a puddle. You're in a puddle and you cry a lot, and you wail and you grieve, and you go through a dark time and just feeling really depressed. And so after, you go through that for as long as it takes, and then you start to find your way up and out of that slowly but surely. That's part of the wisdom of grief, is just let your process do what it does. Have faith that the process is okay, and that's what you need to go through. If you got stuck in grief, if it just seemed like, oh my gosh, this is never ending, it's never getting any better, and I can't take it, that might be a time that you reach out for help and try to see a counselor personally. Or let's say if the pain just was so acute and so intense you didn't know that you could survive it, you might reach out for help, even if the pain is pretty recent. So another thing with the wisdom of grief is that we all do die, and I think that we live our lives largely in our culture in particular, with this kind of Pollyanna thing that we're going to live forever. And it's just not true, and you know that. You are experiencing that close up in a really powerful and intimate way. And in that way, you're ahead of the game than a lot of people who haven't faced that yet. It will come to all of us, whether the death of a loved one first or through our own. It's something we all will experience. And how we deal with that is one of the big challenges of life. So last with grief's wisdom, what I want to say is that I think that losing somebody is an opportunity to look at the question of what does it all mean to you. And that's something that some people think about all the time, others not so much. But it's something you could be asking and looking at all sorts of sources and places to get answers about that. You could read, there's a lot of philosophical literature out there on that kind of question. There's churches to go to, and priests, pastors, whatever, who, they study that. That's what their whole thing is about. And they can be really helpful, may have some answers that work for you. There is nature. Some people just really find wisdom in nature, and just whether that's a sunny meadow when you're in a good mood, or a wild, stormy hillside when you're wailing, you can feel this affinity and just this oneness and sameness that can be really healing and offer you a different kind of connection. And then last, there's things like meditation or just being in the silence that can be really helpful. I know for me, I had this profound experience one time of just like I'd always had this empty pain on the inside in my gut that I was able to finally just surrender into without fear, or with fear, but not running from the fear. And that emptiness, the quality of it kind of changed by just going into it. And the emptiness, instead of this terrifying black hole, became this kind of peaceful state of nothingness that eventually I felt kind of held by and connected to the whole universe. And in that place felt totally connected to those who have died and gone before and will come after, and everything. It was really timeless and beautiful, and you can find your own kind of experience or answer that way. So the last thing I want to talk about is just some skills or tools or techniques to get you through the holiday. Holidays tend to be really difficult. Holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, all those kind of things, major milestones. And part of what's so difficult about them is the expectation that they're going to be happy events. So don't should on yourself. Like should, the word means it's not the way it is. So if you have this idea in your head that Christmas should be happy and your family thinks Christmas should be a good time, I would encourage you to challenge that belief and say Christmas is not going to be a happy time. Christmas is going to be a time of grieving, and we may have some blissful moments and some really sweet, happy moments, but grief is going to permeate Christmas too, because you just missed your loved one so much, and that's just where it's at. Something you can do that can help on the holidays is you can create some new traditions. Like if you've done the same thing for years and years and years with family members who have now passed on, you might want to do something a little different, because it can make the whole seem even bigger, that this same thing is not the same anymore because they're not there. But maybe you mix up your holiday, which can help your family move on to the place of a new normal. That's one thing we really like, is we like things to go back to our status quo. We want things to return to normal, but you won't ever have the same normal again. You can have a new normal though. Another thing you can do is include your lost ones in your holiday. Like, let's say that your daughter died and she had some favorite cookies. So you make those cookies and you cry, and maybe you make them with somebody else, or maybe it's just you and those cookies. And your tears and those cookies get molded together, and you can put them in people's stockings, and it's a way that you and she can spread love and that sense of connection to her with everybody over the holidays. And don't forget to talk about your loved one too. One of the things that people say often that's really painful is people don't talk about them like they don't exist. And they really do exist in your heart very strongly still. And it's okay to acknowledge that. And you guys can laugh and share memories or whatever about your loved one during the holidays as well. And last point I want to make around holiday self-care is plan ahead. Plan ahead for an exit strategy, like if things become overwhelming and you need to get away, have a way that you could do that, whether that's to leave somewhere or to just go to your room and shut the door if everybody's at your house. But set that up for yourself. Plan for needing support too, that maybe you're just going to get online and get onto some of those chat sites or whatever, or just read people's stories who have gone through suffering. Maybe you pray, maybe you call a friend, maybe you just go out into the woods with your dog and hit some trees with some sticks and scream. But it's okay to plan for that, and it's okay to need that and do that to get through this time in whatever way that you need to. Anyway, that's all I've got, and my heart feels for yours, and I hope I've been of help.